welcome to Gripping Tales. Are you ready for today's video? It starts now.
What if hospitals aren't just places where people die, but places where death lingers, waiting, watching, refusing to leave? Most people see hospitals as sterile, clinical environments governed by science and medicine. But ask anyone who's worked a night shift. Nurses, orderlies, security guards, morgue attendants, and they'll tell you a different story. They'll tell you about the 3 a.m. hours when the fluorescent lights flicker and the hallways echo with footsteps that have no source. About patients who talk to people who aren't there. About call lights going off in empty rooms. About elevators that arrive on floors with nobody inside. Tonight I'm sharing 8 true horror stories from hospital night shift workers. People who spent years in the presence of death and learned that sometimes the boundary between life and death isn't as solid as we'd like to believe. These aren't urban legends passed around break rooms. These are documented accounts from medical professionals who experienced things they can't explain. Things that made them question everything they thought they knew about mortality. If you've ever been in a hospital late at night, you know the feeling, the silence, the emptiness, the sense that you're not alone. These workers know that feeling too. But unlike you, they can't leave when visiting hours end. Let's clock in. This story comes from a nurse, we'll call him David, who worked in an ICU. He was a 40-year-old, bearded, experienced professional who'd seen everything. Codes, traumas, deaths. Nothing rattled him. Until this night. David had been caring for a 29-week pregnant patient who went into labor on his shift. The baby was delivered stillborn. David performed post-mortem care on the infant, retrieved the proper transport container, and volunteered to take the baby down to the morgue himself. It was the middle of the night. The hospital was quiet. David stepped into the elevator alone, holding the small transport container. The doors closed. The elevator descended. Then he heard it. A baby crying. Not faint, not distant. Clear, sharp, wailing, coming from inside the container he was holding. David's heart stopped. He stared at the container, frozen. The crying continued, growing louder, more desperate. "No," he whispered. "No, this isn't happening." He ripped open the cover, his hands shaking, preparing to unzip the bag to check if somehow, impossibly, the baby was alive. But before he heard something else. A voice. Male. Calm. Soothing. "Hush, little one. I've got you. No need to cry." The crying stopped immediately. David stood there, trembling, the container open in his hands. The elevator reached the basement. The doors opened. Silence. He forced himself to open the bag. Inside was exactly what he expected. A deceased 29-week-old baby. No movement. No breath. No signs of life. David completed his task mechanically, placed the container in the morgue, and walked back to his unit. He told his coworkers what happened. They looked at him like he was crazy. Some suggested he was exhausted, hallucinating, stressed from the emotional weight of the situation. But David knows what he heard. A baby crying. A voice comforting it. And he has no explanation. Years later, typing out the story on Reddit, David wrote, "I am a big, bearded, 40-year-old ICU nurse, and that was the scariest shit I've ever experienced. No one believes me to this day. I don't even want to speculate what the crying or the voice was. God." Even typing that out, I felt my chest tightening. Some people who read David's story suggested it was a guardian angel, taking the baby's spirit to wherever it needed to go. Others thought it was a hallucination brought on by trauma. But David doesn't think either explanation is right, because the crying wasn't in his head. It was real, physical, coming from that container. And if it was a hallucination, whose voice comforted the baby? David heard something unexplainable in an elevator, that at least he was alone. The next story involves a nurse who heard something while surrounded by patients and realized that what she was hearing shouldn't have been possible. A nurse working night shift was caring for an elderly woman who was clearly experiencing sundowning, a condition common in dementia patients where confusion and agitation worsen in the evenings. The woman was restless, disoriented, calling out randomly. The nurse did her best to calm her, but nothing worked. The patient kept thrashing, muttering incoherently, clearly distressed. Then, out of nowhere, the woman sat bolt upright and screamed at the top of her lungs, "Uffy! Oofy!" The nurse froze. Oofy? That name was familiar, too familiar. Months earlier, a day shift nurse named Ofi had been driving to work when she went into cardiac arrest behind the wheel. She crashed. The paramedics brought her to the hospital where she worked. Her own colleagues tried to save her in the ICU. She survived a few days, but eventually passed away. The nurse checked the elderly woman's chart. No family members named Ophi. No friends named Ophi. Nothing in her medical history connected her to anyone by that name. And yet, the woman had screamed it. Loud, clear, desperate. The nurse asked the woman, "Who is Ophi?" The patient didn't respond. She lay back down, suddenly calm, and closed her eyes. A few minutes later, she was asleep. The nurse stood there, her skin prickling. They hadn't been talking about Ophi that night. Nobody had mentioned her in months. There was no way this patient, who had never met Ophi, never worked at the hospital, never had any connection to her, could have known that name. Unless Ophi had been in the room. The nurse left the patient's room and found a coworker. "Did you hear that?" She screamed Ophi's name. The coworker went pale. That's not possible." But it had happened, and neither of them could explain it. Some nurses believe that spirits of deceased staff members linger in hospitals, watching over patients, guiding souls as they pass. Others think dying patients can see beyond the veil, perceiving things the living cannot. But this patient wasn't dying, she was just confused, and somehow, in her confusion, she called out to a nurse who'd been dead for months. The nurse who witnessed it never forgot, and she wonders, was Ophi there that night? Standing in the room, unseen, watching over a patient the way she always had in life? Or was it something else entirely? Hearing a name is one thing. What if you see something? What if you look at a patient and they're talking to someone who isn't there? Someone only they can see. This story comes from a nursing home worker who cared for elderly residents during the night shift. The facility was old, quiet, and had a reputation among staff for being active. Several residents, all in different rooms, all with varying degrees of dementia, began talking about the same thing, the girl in the closet. One resident, an elderly woman, would sit up in bed at night and have full conversations with the closet. The worker would enter the room to change her diaper and find the woman propped up on one arm, chatting away to the closed closet door as if someone were standing there. "She's very nice," the resident would say when asked. "The girl, she listens." Other residents mentioned her too, always the same description. A young girl, always in the closet, always quiet, but present to them. The worker tried to dismiss it. Dementia patients hallucinate. They see things that aren't there. It's common. But then something changed. Residents who had never mentioned the girl in the closet before, residents who were alert, oriented, and cognitively sharp, started talking to her just days before they died. One woman in particular stands out. In October, the worker went in to change her at night. The woman was sitting up in bed, smiling, pointing at the closet. "Oh, haven't you met her?" the woman asked, gesturing to the empty closet. "She's lovely. She says it's almost time." "Time for what?" the worker asked, unnerved. "Time to go," the woman said simply. The woman died 3 days later. It happened again with another resident. And another. Always the same pattern. They'd start talking to the girl in the closet. Then, within days, they'd decline rapidly and pass away. The worker began to dread seeing residents talking to the closet, because she knew what it meant. One theory is that the girl in the closet is a spirit who appears to guide dying residents into death. A psychopomp, a figure who eases the transition from life to whatever comes next. Another theory is that dying people's brains undergo changes that allow them to perceive things beyond normal perception. That the girl in the closet has always been there, and only those close to death can see her. But here's what bothers the worker most. The residents aren't scared of her. They smile when they talk to her. They seem comforted by her presence. Which raises the question, if the girl in the closet is a harbinger of death, is she there to take them or to help them? The worker still doesn't know, but she knows one thing for certain. When a resident starts talking to the closet, she makes sure to call their family. Because time is running out. Seeing death approach is one kind of horror. But what about when death has already happened and the body won't stay still? This story comes from a hospital orderly who worked alongside a supervisor in the basement, adjacent to the morgue. It was late around midnight, when they had to retrieve something they'd left in the morgue earlier. The supervisor sent the orderly down to get it. The orderly unlocked the door, stepped inside, and froze. A body under a sheet, one they'd brought in earlier that evening, was sitting upright. And it was moaning. The orderly screamed and ran out of the morgue, sprinting back to the office, pale and shaking. "There's a body sitting up in there! It's moving! It's moaning!" The supervisor sighed. "Oh, that happens sometimes." "What?" the supervisor explained. When a body decomposes, gases build up inside. Sometimes those gases escape suddenly, causing the body to move, shift, or even produce sounds that resemble moaning or groaning. It's a natural post-mortem phenomenon. The orderly was horrified. "You're telling me this is normal?" "Yeah, you'll get used to it." But the orderly never did. He quit 2 weeks later. The phenomenon is called post-mortem gas movement, and it's well documented. Bodies can shift, sit up partially, release sounds, and even appear to breathe as gases exit the lungs. But knowing the scientific explanation doesn't make it any less terrifying when you're standing alone in a morgue at midnight and a corpse under a sheet suddenly sits up in front of you. Another hospital worker shared a similar story. While transporting a body to the morgue, the deceased patient's cell phone, still in their belongings, started ringing. The workers froze, staring at the body bag, listening to the phone ring and ring and ring. They didn't answer it. They just stood there, paralyzed, until it stopped. Later, they found out it had been a family member calling to say goodbye. But in that moment, in the cold basement of a hospital, with a body on a gurney and a phone ringing from inside the bag, it felt like the dead were calling back. Postmortem gas movement can be explained by science. But not everything that happens in hospitals has a rational explanation. Sometimes, the dead don't just move, they interact. A nurse worked on the top floor of a hospital, a unit that had been many things over the years: pediatrics, AIDS hospice, post-acute long-term care. The floor had history. And it had a ghost. The staff had named him Georgie. Every single night, at least once per shift, the elevator would arrive at their floor, empty, no one inside, no one had pressed the button. The elevator would just come up. And then the doors would open and close rapidly, over and over, open, close, open, close, open, close, like something was trying to get out but couldn't. The first time it happened to the new nurse, she was terrified. She stood in the hallway, watching the elevator doors slam open and shut, over and over, with no explanation. A senior nurse walked past calmly. "Oh, that's just Georgie." "Georgie? Yeah, he does that. Just say hi and he'll stop." The new nurse thought she was joking, but the doors kept slamming. So, feeling ridiculous, she said, "Hi, Georgie." The elevator doors stopped immediately. The elevator descended quietly and didn't come back for the rest of the shift. It became routine. Whenever the elevator arrived empty and started its door-slamming routine, someone would say, "Hi, Georgie," and it would stop. Patients on that floor also reported strange occurrences. One night, a completely alert and oriented patient called a nurse over. "Can you please tell those kids to quit playing in my bathroom?" The nurse checked. No kids. The bathroom was empty. But the patient insisted they'd been hearing children laughing and running around in there for hours. The unit had been a pediatric floor decades earlier. Some staff believe the spirits of children who died there still play in the halls late at night. Others think the entire floor is haunted by the souls of patients who passed during the AIDS crisis, when the unit served as a hospice ward. But Georgie, whoever or whatever Georgie is, has become part of the culture. New staff are introduced to him on their first shift, and everyone knows. If the elevator starts acting up, just be polite, say hello, acknowledge him. Because ignoring Georgie only makes it worse. At least Georgie is relatively harmless. But not all hospital spirits are so benign. Some make it very clear that you're not welcome. A young man took a job as a night shift janitor at a hospital. The pay was good, the work was simple. Clean the floors, empty the trash, make sure everything was ready for morning staff. But part of the job required him to clean the morgue. The morgue was in the basement, old, cold, dimly lit. The hallways leading to it were long and narrow, and the fluorescent lights flickered constantly. For the first few nights, everything was fine. He'd go down, mop the floors, wipe down surfaces, and leave quickly. But on his fourth night, something changed. He finished cleaning the main building and went down to check the morgue. He didn't really need to clean inside, just do a quick walkthrough to make sure everything looked okay. He went in, looked around, and started to leave. Then he heard something drop, a metallic clang, something hitting the floor. He stopped, turned around, stared into the morgue. Nothing. Just empty tables and cold air. He decided, fuck it, I don't care, and walked away. But as he left the morgue and entered the main hallway, he saw something out of the corner of his eye. A person, sitting in one of the chairs, just sitting there in the dark. He turned to look directly at it, but nothing was there. He started walking faster, The hallway felt longer than it should. The lights flickered, and then he heard footsteps behind him. Heavy, deliberate, following him. He didn't look back, he just ran. When he reached the stairwell, he heard a door slam behind him. Loud, violent, like someone had thrown it shut with force. He sprinted up the stairs, burst out of the basement, and didn't stop until he was outside in his car. He sat there, shaking, trying to catch his breath. The next day, he told his supervisor he couldn't work nights anymore. His supervisor just nodded, like he'd heard it before.
"Yeah," the supervisor said.
"The morgue is weird. A lot of people quit after working down there." The janitor asked if anyone had died in the basement recently. The supervisor said no, but the building was old. Lots of people had died there over the decades. And the morgue had always been in the basement. "Whatever's down there doesn't like visitors," the supervisor said. The janitor switched to day shift. He never went back to the basement. And he never took a job that required him to work around death again. Because he knows now, some places don't want you there. And if you ignore the warnings, they'll make sure you leave. That janitor got out before things escalated. But some hospital workers aren't so lucky. They're stuck on their shifts, trapped with something that won't leave them alone. A nurse worked in an old psychiatric hospital with multiple buildings on the properties. Some were in use, some were abandoned. And then there was Unit 12B. 12B had been closed for years. Parts of it were flooded. The building was condemned, locked up, and considered unsafe. No one went there. No one should have been there. But on night shift, between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., the nurses would receive phone calls from Unit 12B. The phone would ring at the nurses' stations. The caller ID would show extension 2307, Unit 12B. The first time it happened, a new nurse answered. Static, heavy breathing, then a voice, distant and garbled. "Help me!" The nurse dropped the phone and ran to find her supervisor. "I just got a call from 12B!" The supervisor's face went pale. "You answered it?" "Yeah, why?" "On your first night, you're told to never answer calls from 12B, ever." But it was too late. Once someone answered, the calls wouldn't stop. For the rest of the night, the phone rang, over and over, extension 2307, Unit 12B. Every time they ignored it, it rang again. Sometimes it would ring simultaneously on multiple phones throughout the unit, to same extension. The calls continued until shift change at 7 a.m., then they stopped. No one ever figured out how the calls were happening. The building had been disconnected from the phone system years ago. The extension shouldn't have worked. But it did. And every few months, a new nurse would answer by mistake, and the cycle would start again. Some staff believed the calls were from a patient who had died in Unit 12B, someone who was still trying to reach out, still asking for help that never came. Others thought it was something darker, a residual haunting, a loop of suffering playing over and over in that abandoned building. One nurse tried to investigate. She went to 12B during the day, found a way inside through a broken window, and walked through the flooded hallways. She found old patient records scattered on the floor, wheelchairs rusted and overturned, and rooms that looked like they'd been abandoned mid-use. But she never found the source of the calls, and she left feeling like she'd disturbed something that didn't want to be disturbed. The calls from 12B continue, and the nurses have learned, don't answer, no matter how many times it rings, no matter how curious you are. Because whoever, or whatever, is calling from that abandoned wing doesn't need help. They're calling to make sure you know they're still there. Phone calls from abandoned units are eerie. But the final story isn't about something distant or hidden away. It's about something that appeared right in front of a nurse and shouldn't have existed at all. A 22-year-old nursing assistant was working a night shift in the ICU when a patient passed away around 2 a.m. The hospital was extremely busy. Transporters were backed up. So the nursing assistant, confident and strong, volunteered to take the body down to the morgue himself. He cleaned the body, placed it in a bag, tagged it, and wheeled it toward the elevator. He pressed the button for the basement. The doors closed. The elevator descended. But halfway down, the elevator stopped. Not at a floor, just stopped, between floors. The nursing assistant stood there, confused, staring at the body bag on the gurney. The elevator wasn't moving. The lights flickered once. Then the elevator doors opened. But not to the basement. To the 4th floor. The nursing assistant's blood ran cold. The fourth floor was the neonatal ICU. He hadn't pressed that button. The doors stayed open. He waited. Nothing happened. No one got on. No one was in the hallway. He pressed the basement button again. The doors closed. The elevator descended normally and arrived at the morgue without further incident. He completed his task, returned the gurney, and went back to work. But something about that stop bothered him. The fourth floor. Why had the elevator opened there? Later, he mentioned it to a coworker. "Oh," the coworker said quietly. "Did you know the patient you just brought down used to work here? She was a neonatal nurse, worked on the fourth floor for 20 years before she got sick." The nursing assistant froze. "What?" "Yeah, that was her unit. That's where she spent most of her career." The nursing assistant didn't sleep well that night. He kept thinking about the elevator stopping, opening to the fourth floor, a floor where the deceased patient had spent decades caring for newborns. Had her spirit tried to go back? One last visit to the place she loved? Or had the elevator malfunctioned, and the timing was just coincidence? He doesn't know, but he knows one thing. He never volunteered to take a body to the morgue alone again. Because sometimes, the dead don't go quietly. Sometimes, they have one more place they need to visit before they're ready to leave. And if you're the one transporting them, you're just along for the ride. These are 8 true horror stories from hospital night shift workers. From crying babies in elevators, to names called by patients who couldn't have known them, to residents who see death approaching, to bodies that sit up, to elevators that respond to voices, to morgues that don't want visitors, to phone calls from abandoned wings, to spirits who return to the places they loved. These stories prove that hospitals are more than buildings full of sick people. They're places where life and death exist side by side, where the boundary between the two is thin, and where, late at night, when the hallways are empty and the only sound is the hum of machines, strange things happen. If you work in a hospital, you know. You've felt it. The 3 a.m. shift, the empty hallways, the sense that you're not alone. And maybe you're not. Stay safe out there, and remember, the night shift sees things the day shift never will.
Thanks for watching. Every ending hides the beginning of another tale, and ours is already on its way. Stay tuned. You'll find the next chapter right here, and soon.